Hi, this is Richard, and welcome to another episode of my podcast, The Future of the World. This is episode 3, and it's entitled Claiming Our Sovereignty. Okay, now last week, if you heard last week's episode, you'll remember that we talked about the ruling class. Okay, what is the ruling class and how they represent the evil side of the yin-yang in our society, okay? They see themselves as better than us. They see us as just the masses, the sheep, the feeders, the plebes, whatever you want to call it. And they feel like they have the right and they have the power to simply control us and control society in a way that suits them. Okay? I think there's a quotation from Edward Bernays, who was actually the nephew of Sigmund Freud, and he came to the US and he became very influential in advertising and even in mass mind control. And so in the beginning of his 1928 book Propaganda, that's almost 100 years ago, right? This quote I think is worth citing in its entirety, okay? And this is how it goes. The conscious and intelligent manipulation of the organized habits and opinions of the masses is an important element in democratic society. Those who manipulate this unseen mechanism of society constitute an invisible government which is the ruling power of our country. We are governed, our minds are molded, our tastes formed, our ideas suggested, largely by men we have never heard of. This is a logical result of the way in which our democratic society is organized. Vast numbers of human beings must cooperate in this manner if they are to live together as a smoothly functioning society. So you'll see here from this quotation that the ruling class has no interest in fostering human freedom, okay? But we are by nature free. So they need to use deception and manipulation and mind control techniques in order to keep us contained within the society that serves them. Okay? So this is the situation we're in. We were born free, but we are forever in chains, as we talked about last week. We're currently in chains, and this pandemic that has been foisted upon us in the past year is really exacerbating and really showing that right in front of our faces. That the ruling class is trying to gain more control. They're trying to be able to tell us what to do, okay? In the process, that's really forcing us to make a decision, okay? Everybody's being forced to make a decision at this point. The decision, I am going to be free, or I am free, or I'm going to stand up for my freedom, versus I'm going to continue following what I'm told to do, okay? And for those sitting on the fence, it kind of feels like we're running out of time to sit on the fence. A decision has to be made. Okay, now I'm not going to tell anyone what they should do. I'm not here to say that every soul on the planet came here to awaken and to fight for their freedom. I don't know what each person's agenda or objective is. But I would say that if you're listening to this podcast, you're probably at least somewhat interested in knowing, how do I become free? How do I claim or reclaim my sovereignty? Okay, so that's what we're going to be talking about. And essentially what has to be clear is you can't claim your freedom and at the same time follow orders that you don't believe are just. Okay, just for convenience sake, or just so that you don't stick out of the crowd, or for whatever reason, for fear, okay? It's that decision that you make that is actually going to cause you to feel like you are free, okay, which we're going to talk about later. So let's assume that things at this point are not going to just suddenly get better, okay? What we've got coming down the pipe now is that the mandatory vaccines, okay, we've got vaccines. They're not mandatory yet in a lot of places, but they're pushing for mandatory vaccination. Now we're starting to hear what they're pushing for vaccine passports, okay, so that you're not allowed to travel, you're not allowed to work and so forth without this passport. Okay, so is it at that point that enough of us are going to say, okay, enough's enough and we're not going to accept this? What about if we move into, the China-style social credit system where, your banking is affected by how much you comply with government and so forth? What about this idea that there's going to be a control and surveillance grid on our society? Are you going to be okay with that? Okay, these are the questions that are coming up now, and increasingly it's becoming difficult not to make an internal decision as to what you stand for. Okay? Now, if what I'm saying here is making you feel a little bit nervous, afraid, anxious, okay, that's completely understandable. Okay, that's kind of the nature of the quest, right? What I would ask you is to consider following your conscience. Okay, not following me, follow your conscience. Have the courage to do what your conscience is telling you and follow it to where it leads. What I will say is I believe doing that leads you to a place where you get beyond the fear, where you start to feel the power of your own sovereignty, okay, and the power of the sovereignty of like-minded people around you, okay, and we start to reclaim that sovereignty. Now, the place I think where this was best illustrated was in the American Declaration of Independence, okay, the oft-quoted lines, and it's worth examining again, I think. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, and that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Okay, so all people are created equal. This is self-evident, because if you look at a baby being born, you certainly can't say, well, that baby was born in order to rule over other people. And in just the same way, you can say that baby was not born to be ruled over. Okay? Everyone is born innately equal. Now, of course, yes, some people are born into royal families and they become rulers. Some people are born into slavery. Okay? But that's not something that is innate in the person. That is based on human societal structures, culture, and different ways of organizing things that rely on things like deception, manipulation, and the use of force. Okay? So it's because these things are in place currently that it's possible for someone to end up in a lifetime of slavery without really having had any choice. Okay? The intention for life is that each individual has the choice and can choose what they're going to do. Now we have choices at this point. Okay? We have the choice whether we're going to assert our freedom or not. Okay? Now the Declaration of Independence shows us that the United States was founded on the principles of the innate freedom, and to date it is the best example of a country that has attempted to govern free citizens, okay, where it openly declares that each citizen is free and therefore we will be organizing ourselves in order to protect those freedoms. Now, having said that, I think it's clear that those freedoms have not been protected, and that the ruling class, okay, the ever-present ruling class, has been able to come in slowly over time, over history, and take over control of the United States. Okay, this is kind of where we sit now. So why were they able to do that? Well, the reason is because freedom is not something that people with negative intentions are going to protect. They're actually going to work to erode them. This is what's at play in our world and always has been. Okay, the innate freedom of individuals, and you've got powerful people who want to rule over others and then who want to thwart those freedoms. Okay, so with their power, they're working to erode those freedoms, and the individuals must be willing to protect those freedoms, otherwise they will slowly go away without even people noticing. Now I know we're doing a lot of quotes today, but I think they're all very valuable. I have a quote from Ronald Reagan here, which is extremely valuable in this regard, and it's again an oft quoted line here. Freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. We didn't pass it to our children in the bloodstream. It must be fought for, protected, and handed on for them to do the same. Or one day we will spend our sunset years telling our children and our children's children what it was once like in the United States where men were free. Okay, now some people believe that a return to constitutional rule in the United States is the first step for all of us to become free. Okay? The United States returns to a government that is of the people, by the people, for the people. Okay? In other words, a government that is really there to protect the freedom of its citizens. They're not influenced by foreign powers. Okay, and from that point, once that's established, the United States can then export this freedom throughout the world, so that the United States of America kind of transforms into the United Countries of the world, in which each country will have the sovereignty that each state has in the United States, okay, or was meant to have. So I've thought about this idea, if this is the way things are going. It's possible, and I think it would be a step in the right direction, but I actually think that there's a much bigger opportunity for humanity and for us as individuals. Okay? And what I believe is that as individuals gain their sovereignty, they will begin getting together with like-minded people into groups or communities. And they already have started doing this. Okay? So let's say they form a community of sovereign individuals, and so that operates as a sovereign group, and that sovereign group then enters into relationships with other sovereign groups. And as this becomes more successful, this sort of idea spreads across the world, and eventually that's what the world becomes, is a collection of sovereign groups where individuals self-identify with a certain group and say, I want to be part of this group, and I want to, go by whatever agreements that we have within this group as to how to live, and then have relationships with outside groups. Now, this is going to be the subject of a lot of our discussion going forward, and I think it's a very exciting subject. So, we'll be talking about that in later episodes. For now, what I want to talk about and focus on, just as we're ending this, is, well, what does it really mean for an individual to become sovereign? Okay, how does an individual actually establish their sovereignty? So that they're not saying, I'll let someone else do it, just tell me what to say. Okay? For an individual to become sovereign, they're involved in the process, not just of their own life, but of their community's governance and of what's going on in the world. Okay? I've got 5 stages, what I consider the 5 stages of awakening to sovereignty, which, I'd like to discuss. Okay, stage 1 is called I am safe. Okay, the individual is safe because the individual is in the womb. Okay, and all its needs are being taken care of. It's warm, it's safe, it's protected. Okay, but as soon as someone is born, they go into the second stage, which is the feeling that they are not safe. So I am not safe. I need someone to help me. Okay, that's when you immediately have a bond or a link with your parents or caregiver, and you know that you need things from them in order to survive. And that, unfortunately, as you grow up, people can hang on to this and have that same need for authority to provide for them and to tell them what to do and so forth. Okay, so that That's why we need to rise to the third stage. And in the third stage, you say, I am not safe and I need to help myself. Okay? This is a big leap. Okay? This is the big leap of realizing that you are your own authority. Okay? That you don't have to follow authority, that you don't need authority to tell you what to do. You can make up your own mind. Okay? You have that freedom. Okay. But this is not the final stage. The final stage is when you come to the realization, I am not safe and I need to help humanity to help itself. Okay? In this stage, you move away from your own personal needs and you become connected with the collective. You become connected with your brothers and sisters on the planet, and you start working together. And you start feeling the love. This is where you really move out of the fear. You moved out of the fear in the last stage, but in this stage you really move into the love and the connectedness. And your whole life is kind of motivated by this feeling of love. Okay, and so that then brings us into the final stage, which is, I am safe. Okay, it's the same as when you were in the womb, but it's completely different. Because rather than feeling safe because you're being taken care of, you feel safe because you know you're sovereign. And you know that you are contributing to something bigger than yourself. Okay, so when each individual goes through these stages and can arrive at a place where they feel sovereign and they feel connected to the community of human beings, that's when we're going to be able to create the type of world that really serves us.